What's happening, fam? John here with another One Piece chapter review, this time on 1036, which has finally been released, and it is titled Bushido is the Way of the Samurai. And before we get into the chapter, we can go ahead and address the cover page, and it would seem that we get a color cover page rather than the cover story that we started off in the last chapter. And despite my excitement for a new cover story, this is actually okay because it's a pretty cool looking cover page. I mean, all the straw hats look amazing, and we get this kind of city under ice aesthetic. And at first glance, it kind of has this feel of a kind of intended message when you look at some of the things that are going on in this cover page. Like, for example, if you look at Luffy's coat, it would appear that there's a message that reads every drop in the ocean, and even though it's incomplete, we would assume that last word is counts. And then when glancing at Zoro's coat, the message on his arm reads made ripples. And then moving on to Brook, we see the message on the bottom of his coat that says high tides. And the last straw hat with at least a readable message would be Jinbei, whose patch says deep blue. So those are all sea, ocean, or water related remarks. And then we get some number references with Usopp wearing the number 4, Zoro wearing the number 2, and Jinbei wearing the number 10. And at first I thought these were just numbers referring to the straw hat and the number of which they joined the Straw Hat crew. For example, Zoro was 2nd and Jinbei was number 10. However, Usopp, if I'm not mistaken, was technically the 3rd Straw Hat, since Nami's joining of the Straw Hat crew was after Usopp's. I mean, even though she was technically introduced 2nd, I do believe she officially joined 4th. And then there's also this mention under ice of the word soleil, which is the French word for sun, and then the numbers 967, which could be 1967. And the only thing I could think of that this could possibly be a reference to is a movie that came out in 1967 called Soleil Au, or Au Sun. This movie actually takes place in Paris and is meant as a kind of meta reference to racial inequality, which, if you saw my last theory video, could deeply tie into the theme of One Piece. But I digress. If you guys have any thoughts or any ideas on the numbers or the meanings of this cover page, as it seems a little less than random, please let me know in the comment section down below what you've thought of or what you figured out. But now that this beautiful and fun cover page is out the way, we can go ahead and move on with the contents of the chapter. And this chapter pretty much picks up where we left off in the last chapter, with Zoro cutting down King. And before we can get the official announcement that Zoro is the official winner, we get a meaningful flashback which does serve to the purpose of showing us the similarities between Luffy, Zoro, Kaido, and King. And in a very interesting move, we see that Joy Boy is something or someone who was known to King before actually meeting Kaido. And from the way the text appears, it seems like King is just sharing the legend with Kaido more so than accusing him of being Joy Boy. But we also see that King doesn't care if he is or if he isn't. He's dedicated himself to being on Kaido's side no matter what. And then we also get the mirrored dedication that we got from Zoro way back in the beginning of One Piece, where he vows to make his captain Pirate King and also vows not to lose. And this might be stretching it a little bit, but the whole interaction between Kaido and King in this chapter, and in their comparison to Luffy and Zoro being so obvious, it kind of makes me think that there's a small possibility that at some point throughout this chapter, or even after the conclusion of Luffy and Kaido's fight, it could be a passing of the torch or a reason for King, or possibly even King and Kaido, to approve of Luffy's efforts to change the world. Heck, or maybe even declare that he might be Joy Boy himself. More on that later, I suppose, but the chapter returns to the present with Zoro declaring himself the King of Hell before we get the official narration block declaring Zoro the winner. And the next 2 pages are really just a boatload of exposition meant to briefly give us an update on all the major ongoing situations within Onigashima and the rebellion. Now, the chapter does bounce around a lot, but the first characters that we actually checked in with are going to be Yamato and Fuga. And it appears that there is another number named Roki blocking the door to the armory. And at first, Yamato tries to get Fuga to steal the key, use the key, operate a lever to open the door, but Fuga actually just tackles Roki through the door with his horns. Yamato then asks him to stay behind and keep Roki down before we move on to Usopp and his situation, trying to save, protect, and recover the fallen Okiku and Kinemon. We even get a little bit of the classic Usopp crying while he's still doing the heroic thing and staying by the side of Okiku and Kinemon as they beg him to leave. And while this exchange does seem a bit short in this chapter, I imagine once it's fully animated, it'll actually be a little more poetic and a little more understanding of the type of character that Usopp is. But before he could be swarmed by the surrounding opponents, he is saved by none other than Izo. And I gotta say, Izo has a very short appearance in this chapter, but from what he is present for, it's actually a pretty amazing way for Oda to show off the type of character he is. Whereas even up until now, he's kind of felt like the kind of side character whose involvement is as deep as Marco's with this whole situation. But in a similar vein to Marco, he's actually giving props to Luffy, telling Okiku and Kinemon to hang in there if they believe in Luffy. Now, Izo's got some amazing panels in this chapter and even goes as far as to refer to Usopp as God Usopp. But he ends up staying behind to provide cover fire for Usopp, Kinemon, and Okiku to make it to safety. And the next conflict that this chapter bounces around to is the fight between Fukurokuju and Raizo. And although this chapter spends very little time in regards to this fight, we do see that they've reached a kind of stalemate in the sense that they've paralyzed each other. The only difference being that the fires are reaching Raizo faster than they're reaching Fukurokuju. And next, the chapter gives us an update with the whole situation between Hiyori and Orochi. And it's still rather unclear on what she plans on doing, but it would seem that she's trying to keep Orochi in that place for some reason. However, we next move on to the situation on the second basement floor, where we get some rather interesting updates. It would appear that Apu and also the number MB have bailed out on the fight with the CP0 and left Drake and the number Zanki behind to fend for themselves. And we quickly see that that did not bode well for Drake and Zanki because they both were defeated by the CP0 members. And it's noted that Drake was a tough enough opponent, so it's not like he was just mowed over, since we do see some visible damage on one of the CP0 members, but not so much on the other. In any case, they get an update from the CP0 member who's been hanging around with that Mary playing that Japanese board game Go. And he informs them that the lead performers have all been defeated, meaning the Tobiropo and the Calamities. And upon learning this, they're instructed to hurry. And I guess this is one thing I would say that really emphasizes the difference between the early scans and the official release, because when I read the early scans, I was given the impression that they were just going to give up on Robin and get out of there. Whereas this official read, it's very clear that they're just rushing to capture Robin from this point forward. But the exposition that he offers in this chapter is a little bit more heavy than the exposition we got earlier, because when he refers to the new generation possibly pulling off the upset, he's talking about the crews of Luffy, Law, and Kid, and how their victory here could have major consequences on the world outside of Wano, which is already in a good amount of turmoil. And it's even referred to as fanning the flames of the incidents that are occurring all over the world, which kind of gives a nod to the potential large in-game story of One Piece. More on that another time, because the last place we check in with for this chapter is the fight between the two potential Joy Boys, Luffy and Kaido. We get a good amount of Conqueror's Haki used throughout the last few pages, and we also get to see that Kaido is actually fluctuating his hybrid form a bit. So there's a bit of a back and forth between the two of them, and Luffy even pulls out a named move in the form of Rock Gun. And though the attacks seem to be fairly effective, we also get to see at the end of the chapter that Luffy and Kaido both really seem to be enjoying themselves in this fight. And that is how we end this chapter. So to do something a little bit different, I'm going to condense the rating portion of this video, and I'm going to go ahead and give this chapter an 8 overall. It was an amazing chapter in terms of artwork. Now, there wasn't a whole lot of hype, but the story was fairly good as we got a whole lot of updates. We got to see that Yamato is now in the armory, although I can't imagine that she's going to be, just ending her situation there. I feel like it's been too easy so far for her to complete her task. And with the whole situation with Drake being defeated and CP0 still pursuing Robin, I think we have a whole lot to look forward to, especially when it comes to seeing which central conflict Oda wants to focus on for the next chapter. Now, to my knowledge, there's no break next week, so my assumption is that we'll probably pick up where we left off with the fight between Kaido and Luffy, and we'll probably get a good amount of that before we get Kaido's full backstory, which I'm super ready for, and also ready to get back to this cover story with the Germa. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below, what you thought about this chapter, if you have any thoughts on the whole idea of Kaido potentially being Joy Boy. Now, do you think that this is a destiny thing or kind of a role fulfillment comment thing. Also, let me know what you guys think about this new kind of condensed format where I'm not spending so much time talking about the artwork, story, and hype, rather just covering the chapter and doing my discussion throughout said chapter. In any case, my name is John from AFA. If you guys enjoyed this content, please like, share, and subscribe. That would greatly help me out. And I'll probably be back very shortly with another One Piece related video that isn't a review, most likely on the topic of Joy Boy. But in any case, I'll catch you guys in the next video. Thank you very much for tuning in.